It gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Greta Franzini, one of my doctoral students from the UCL Centre for Digital Humanities, who's been headhunted by the guys in the Humanities Centre at Leipzig and is going to be disappearing off there for 2 years, but that'll give me plenty of opportunity to go and visit for supervisions, I hope. Greta is going to talk to us about part of her doctoral thesis, a catalogue of digital editions, which is a subset of digital edition of St. Augustine's De Civitate Dei. Greta, thank you.
Thank you for staying for a second talk, everyone. Yes, I hope this means Simon will be pouring 2 glasses of wine per person rather than 1 later. Anyway, today I'd like to talk to you about my PhD and how my research thus far, this is my 2nd year into my PhD, has influenced or is shaping what will be the main output of my studies, which is a digital edition of the oldest surviving manuscript of St. Augustine's the Civitate Dei. So what I'd like to talk to you about is 2 things. The catalogue of digital editions I've been working on for the past year, and the digital edition itself I'm starting to work on now, along with information about the manuscript it showcases. These 2 bits complement each other but are quite different in the sense that the former, the catalogue, started off as a personal endeavour, but I hope will become more of a collaborative endeavour for the benefit of the whole digital humanities community, and indeed to all those disciplines to whom this work might be relevant or useful, whereas the second is more of a personal effort. So how I'd like to structure this talk, if you can see today, is to briefly give you some background or sort of an introduction to how I got into the field of electronic editing, share with you my research questions, then, as I said, talk about the catalogue, the benefits of what I've been doing so far, how I go about building it, how the data can be integrated and further analysed with other services and tools, and some initial surprising results from my work thus far. And then move on to the digital edition, talk to you about the features of the manuscript, its conservation status, the process of transcription I started back in January, publication, so what I plan on including in my born digital edition, and ideas for future work, so stuff I cannot sadly do as part of my PhD, but maybe at postdoc level or whenever. So, I have a background in classics. I consider myself a classicist. I've always enjoyed reading classical authors and learning languages, both ancient and modern. And it was during my MA in Digital Humanities at King's that I first developed an interest in the field of electronic editing, as I saw it as an interesting means of not only learn or study the manuscripts we're actually annotating, but learn more about our languages today, modern languages. And when we're looking at a manuscript, we're not only looking, or letter or document, whatever, we're not only looking at the morphology, the grammar, the syntax, we're also looking at, so we learn more about the social and the historical context of document. We learn more about the manuscript as writing support, as an object, as an artifact. We sometimes are able to identify scribal hands. And what I really fascinated by is the study of the genetic edition, so the study of manuscripts and the development over time. And I'm thinking here of the wonderful work Elena Pierazzo is doing at King's College London on genetic editions. This is a screenshot I took from her, one of the projects I think she's working on now, which is Marcel Proust's diary or notebook. And so for those of you who don't know or are not familiar with what genetic editing is, but probably most of you do, is basically the study of how a study of how the manuscript developed chronologically, also in an attempt to learn more about what went on in the author's mind when he was writing it. So electronic editing is very much an investigative effort and opens up many research avenues and possibilities, and I became so fascinated with it that I decided I would create a digital edition myself, as you do, naively and blissfully ignorant of the mountain of work such an effort entails. Anyway, this led me to UCLDH, and one of the first things I did there as a good PhD student is to read up on the field of electronic editing, so as to familiarize myself with what was going on. and identify any gaps or issues I should be aware of before I embarked on this monumental task myself. So the first questions I started asking myself were, what makes a good digital edition? What features do current digital editions share? What is the state of the art? So what are people doing now? And the fourth question is particularly relevant to me, given my background. So why are there so few electronic editions of ancient texts? Because when I started looking at the web and browsing and surfing, I realized, or I noticed, there's a considerable numerical disparity between the electronic representation of medieval and modern texts and that of ancient. So then why is it? Why don't we have as many ancient as we do modern? Is it because we have more modern and medieval texts, or are there any other elements that come into play? So the answers I hope to give to these questions, or I'm trying to give to these questions, will ultimately inform the production of my digital edition. And as I said, in my first attempt to answer these questions, I couldn't help but notice that the web world of electronic editions at the moment is really chaotic, and we have no means of systematically recording, quantifying, and evaluating what is already available on the web in terms of digital editions, and there is a lot. So as a student interested in learning more about the field and the state of the art, it was very hard for me to make any sense of what was already out there, and what I should avoid, what I should include in my edition. Some scholars have already tried to organize the information in the editions, so here is a list. First of some examples. Patrick Sale's catalogue of scholarly digital editions is the catalogue of the moment. I think he's gathered some 258 over a period of 8 years, if I'm not mistaken. artsandhumanities.net has a list of AHRC-funded projects, among which you have digital editions as well. The Digital Classicist Wiki has a list. Ian Lancashire's Humanities Computing Yearbook. Other examples are Paolo Monella, Dr. Paolo Monella has a list, Cinzia Puceddu has a list, Aurélien Berard has a list. And all of these lists were invaluable to me in my research, in the sense that I don't think I would have come across the editions I have collected myself had it not been for these. But all of these are somewhat limited, in the sense that, for example, the first one, Patrick only harvests and collects scholarly digital editions. So editions he thinks have a strong critical scholarly value. The rest he just doesn't consider. Because of course there's a lot, so he's trying to limit the effort, the workload. And then all of them normally provide a URL of the project, so that's fine, brilliant. They provide a description, so a snippet. This project is about this, but sometimes that snippet is in French, German, English, depending on, it's just normally copy-pasted from the website. And this is all very well and useful, but I just wanted an overview of features as well, like when you buy a cell phone or software. Does it have this? Does it have this? Does it have this? Does it have this? Just a quick overview, and then if I'm interested, I go and learn more about it. So none of these actually list project features. And so what did I decide to do in the moment of madness? I decided to create a catalogue myself that would include features. And this is the link, if you can see it, but I can bring it up maybe later. And I think that there are multiple benefits to having, what I'll show you in a minute, in the sense that having a catalogue with, projects and features would give us, or gives us, an accessible, unique record of what has already been done and the tools that have been used. Not necessarily if the tools have been successful or useful. I think that would be another PhD. But it gives us an idea of what's being used and what's out there. It would give us an insight into past, present, and future projects, so study the development of a project over time and how it's growing and where it's going. So the possibility of viewing trends or patterns, so having the data all in one place can help us analyze the information and make inferences. And it's a means of identifying which areas need to be improved. So I'm thinking here from basic things like broken URLs to issues such as XML annotation of a critical apparatus, for example. this is a screenshot of what it looks like at the moment. It's not very clear, but that's the best I could do. It has some 54 columns and 170 rows, so each row is a project, and it's growing and growing and growing. And just to give you a quick overview, the first 2 rows list features, and I came up with all the features I could think of. They're in there, grouped by category. And the first row, this yellow one, column, this yellow one here, groups projects by time period. And I just decided I would just divide everything into 3 broad time periods: ancient, medieval, and modern. So is the source text ancient, medieval, or modern? Ancient being anything predating 5th century AD, medieval 6th century, 14th century, and modern 15th century onwards. And my catalogue harvests scholarly editions, non-scholarly editions, born digital editions, and digital versions of print volumes. There's no special criteria for inclusion. And they come from numerous sources. They come from Twitter, Google alerts, word of mouth, web browsing, chaining. Every time basically I come across an edition, I stick it in there. And to date, as I said, well, no, I didn't say that actually. I have gathered 230 something over a period of 8 months, 230 I think, but I've only actually published 170 because those are the ones I've had the time to look through in detail. So the remaining 60, I think that's the right maths, yes, are in the pipeline or in a queue waiting for me to look at them and publish them. It is a lot of work. I do realize that, but it's been incredibly comforting to learn through seminars, workshops, and conferences that actually other scholars in the field would like to have such a resource and are actually would gladly contribute to it. So I see this not only as a way of fulfilling my own personal curiosity, but that also of the community, and that's where I hope it'll become something a bit more of a collaborative endeavour. Some of you may recognize the tool, maybe not. Google. I'm not going to go into the technical details and why not, but basically I chose Google because it's free, it's user-friendly, you can access the data online and offline, you can actually have live discussions or chats with other people who are editing the catalogue. So it has a really good support by means of tutorials or discussion groups. So if there's something, if you encounter a problem, normally you'll find a solution online. Somebody's already had that problem, and the fact that you can integrate your data with other tools, not necessarily Google, but for example, I'll show you an example later of Google, but not necessarily Google. You can export the data in various formats as well, CSV, HTML, PDF, Excel, you name it. The way I went about building this, so data collection and content analysis ran along 2 parallel paths. One active approach, I call it, and one passive approach. So the active, what I mean by active approach, it means that I just sat at in front of the computer, looked at the project, and put it in the catalogue and tried to tick as many boxes as I could. And the way I tick the boxes is not by ticking the boxes. I use a decimal numbering system, so 0 and 1, 0 being non-compliant, does it comply to this feature, non-compliant, 1 compliant, 0.5, anything in between. And I try to use numbers as much as possible, so to avoid potential loss of data when data is exported in other formats. Obviously, some categories will only take text, but yeah. And again, Google enables me to add comments or notes or color code the data if I'm unsure of, Normally I use yellow when it's just, I don't know. I'll put an answer, but I'll color code it yellow, and somebody else hopefully will come up later and fix it. And the passive approach is I basically came up with a questionnaire which I sent out to project managers with 7 questions, asking them about their project and to help me out to try and get a better understanding of the project, so behind the scenes, because not everybody, as you'll see later, uploads and puts stuff or publishes stuff on their website. So I basically asked them about project goals and achievements. So what were your goals when you started the project, and did you set out to achieve, or did you achieve what you set out to achieve? User inquiries, do people contact you and what do they ask you? I mean, is it just, can I collaborate, or you made a mistake here? What kind of requests or questions do they ask you? User statistics, just to give me a rough idea, I'm not too bothered about numbers, a rough idea of how many people use your project, just to get an idea of impact. Main audience, is it intended for children, school children, general public, or scholarly elite? Team size or budget, this is a interesting one. A lot of people didn't answer to this question, obviously, but what really surprised me is that those projects that advocate for open access, open source and transparency often don't want to reveal how much they spent on the project. I just find that a little bit strange. Lessons learned, pretty self-explanatory, and sustainability. So how are they planning on maintaining the data in the long run? This is an example of how the data in the table can be viewed or exported into a different tool. This I did in probably 3 or 4 clicks. So what you see is a map, of course, with location marks. The red dots are location marks, and what the red dots are, they represent the institutions that produced that edition. So, and you can zoom in, zoom out as much as you want. There's a lot of clustering. And every time you hover over a location mark, you get a pop-up window with some information about that edition. And these pop-up windows are highly customizable, so you could even include that much data if you wanted to. I chose not to. And so, when I looked at this at first, I said, digital editions seem to be a very Western phenomenon. There's a kind of an Anglo-American clustering. And I don't think I would have picked this up by just looking at the table. This only really, when I saw the map. So I asked myself, why is this? Why is it a UK thing? UK is just completely covered. Or American? Is it because these two countries maybe offer the richest classical literary national curricula in the world? Is it because they're one of or two of the most powerful countries economically and politically? Or is it probably because, and I think this is the reason, digital humanities associations and portals, basically where the money is UK or America? So playing around with the data brings up loads of different other questions which you wouldn't have maybe asked yourself had it not been for the visualization. Now, results. So some of the results of this past, well, the work I've done for the past year. Languages and time period. As I mentioned earlier, there's a considerable numerical disparity, I find, between the electronic representation of ancient text versus modern. So, based on the 170 editions I've collected so far, done an analysis, the majority of editions showcase texts that are written in English, by which I mean Middle English, American English, Englishes, and Latin. So this doesn't really, well, there's other languages here. I'm not going to list them all, but I can show you later if you want. This might suggest that we have more manuscripts in, written in English or Latin. I mean, I'm thinking medieval Latin here. But could it also do with the fact that there's a lot of editing is done first by or digital editions go through OCR? Is it because OCR of Roman script is easier and so it's quicker to publish stuff that's in Roman script rather than ancient Greek, say? Although, there's been huge strides in OCR of ancient Greek. I think Federico and Bruce are speaking next week about, they're the ones who've made wonderful progress on OCR of ancient Greek. But trying to understand, why? And in fact, looking at my catalogue, 56% of the editions are modern, only 18 ancient. and 26 medieval. This, of course, might just be purely coincidental in the sense that I only have 170 editions. There are probably some 500 out there I haven't looked at. So it might be that I've just coincidentally have more English at the moment than Latin or Greek. But it's interesting to see sort of a first overview, and I'm really curious to see how the numbers will change as the catalogue grows. This is what really surprised me. How people encode their texts. So, looking just at the project websites, people encode texts. Well, 36% of the projects are encoded in TI, following TI standards. 6% bespoke set of XML. Other being 19%. It's normally old stuff like plain text, HTML, yeah. And 39%, I have no clue. So I looked and searched and looked. I right-click view source. They don't mention how they produced the, which to me I think is one of just an obvious thing to put up on a website. I did this. I mean, in this field, I encoded it in this particular format. But that's what the TI, that's what really surprised me, in the sense that for those of you who know the TI, you know they're really good at promotion. And they really encourage and push people to use TI. But only 36% use it. I find that surprising. I don't know if anybody else does. And when I asked when I sent emails to project managers asking, and this kind of developed a conversation there, I asked, why not TI? And then the two reasons are, we don't have the time to learn TI, and TI doesn't meet our transcription needs. So they just simply don't have the tags we want, and so it's just easier to create our own custom set of XML. So, I don't know, this really threw me. But anyway, looking at the bigger picture, so if collaboratively edited and populated, I think the catalogue could become some sort of a large, unique, detailed data bank of electronic texts, and one where collaborators can engage in live discussions and learn more about each other's projects. And it could become maybe, possibly, hopefully, I don't know, I'm just really hopeful, one of the scholarly resources for the Digital Humanities, Digital Classicist and Digital Medievalist communities, and Digital Byzantinist, in fact, communities. And just, just in the whole spirit of the collaboration as a means of research, development and discovery, which I think is a very DH thing. Anyhow, moving on to the manuscript. Now I'm going to, in light of the catalogue, I'd like to briefly show you the manuscript, and then tell you how it's influenced my digital edition, or is influencing, because I've only made a start on it seriously now. So there are three reasons why I chose this particular manuscript. One is because this is St. Augustine's the Civitate Dei. One is because I studied it in school, and I really liked the plot, the story, I liked it. Two, I was really surprised. It's the oldest surviving manuscript we have, and I was really surprised that only a handful of people, I'm talking about 4 or 5 people, have actually done research on it. And it all predates the 1950s, with a very brief revival in the 1970s, and that's it. Just forgotten. So that kind of intrigued me. What if I do something, I might, become the expert on the manuscript. That might be quite cool. And thirdly, it happens to be housed in my hometown in Italy, so that's quite handy. The chapter library in which it is housed has decided, or catalogued it, baptized it as manuscript 2826. I have no idea why. I have asked and I received a very confused answer. Maybe I could do another PhD on that. But for those of you who want more technical information, there is a Trismegistus record. It's manuscript 66599. And all of you know what Trismegistus is? Yes? Yes, okay.
I don't.
You don't. It's a portal it's an interdisciplinary portal of, I think, papyrological and epigraphical resources, which I think started out dealing with sort of Egypt and North African material, but is now expanding their scope to the old ancient world in general. So they're just cataloguing manuscripts, ancient manuscripts. It's quite huge. Yeah. Okay, so some of the features. Only books 11 to 16 survive, for a total of 253 folia. It dates back to the early 5th century AD. It's been placed at around 420. So this is contemporary to Augustine himself. And so in the past it's been argued that it could have, come from one of his scribal schools. But it was never proved. It's all based on conjectures. It's never been proved. And E.A. Lowe, very well-known palaeographer, reckoned it was written in Verona, but it's most likely Verona, the hometown. That's where it is housed at the moment. But it's most likely provenance, as others have suggested. I think it's North Africa, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Well, actually, I'll tell you now. Verona at the time, 5th century AD, was also called Roma Minor, and had one of the best scribal schools in what is nowadays Europe. Indeed, the chapter library, which is the scribal school, what it is today, is one of the oldest in Europe. And it was it just produced manuscripts of a sort of a high standard. And as I said, E.A. Lowe reckons this manuscript is a deluxe copy, but I think it's everything but deluxe. And in fact, and consultation with Alberto Campagnolo, book conservator, confirmed my assumption. It is made up. The reason it's not deluxe. It's made up of various of parchment of various thickness and quality. You have very good parchment, and you have very crappy parchment. It looks like scraps, so anything they could find was available at the time. Some present some folia present huge holes, which were there at the time because the writer's written around it. So it's not not very deluxe to have this huge thing in the middle. There are a lot of typos, omissions, which are added interlinearly, deletions, misspellings, and so to me it sounds more, or to us, is more of a study copy, definitely not a deluxe copy that was intended as a gift. So I don't think this is one reason why I don't think it was produced in Verona, but in North Africa. The other interesting thing that corroborates that it might come from North Africa is the actual language itself. It presents some of the language features typical of North African Christian Latin, and recent research by I can't remember her name now, scholar, but it's 2011. Revealed that it wasn't uncommon for North African text at the time to be shipped to mainland, to Italy basically, to Rome and then Verona. So a lot of things tell us that it might come from North Africa, but we can't prove anything at the moment. It is 29 by 19 centimeters in size, so it's nice size, and 30 lines per page of scriptura continua, with very little punctuation, some medial points, and some spaces which denote pauses. It's written in uncial, which was very typical of the time, with some marginalia in half uncial and cursive quarter uncial, the marginalia, most of the marginalia we find were written in the 9th century in cursive minuscule, Veronese minuscule, by two bishops. Verona bishops, and who are quite famous in my hometown, so it is quite a wow factor there. Other features include, well, the ink is rich and brown, and then you have pricking, which is for the ruling, which is quite typical of very ancient manuscripts. So you see all of the images I have are not very good, so it wouldn't really make sense for me to show you anyway. But you only really see it once you have it in front of you. conservation status. This is all from Alberto's work. Just briefly touch upon some of the damage that's been, well, the weathering. Most of it is weathering, so foxing, yellowing, mold, etc., tears, and ink corrosion. Although I think most of the ink corrosion was actually caused by the Vatican Library in 1927, when the manuscript was sent for restoration for some TLC, and it came back looking worse than it actually was when it left Verona. Because I think at the time, before everything happened, wonderful job. The text wasn't really visible. So in the Vatican, what they did is to try and bring up the text and be able to transcribe it and read it properly. They just poured some chemical over it, which would bring the text up for about 20 minutes, rush, write, and then over time it just corroded the page. So now at the moment you have a hole in the page and irreversible damage. And I think I contacted the Vatican Library about, could you give me more information? Do you have a report about, and they only had 3 lines. What did they say? Oh, unbound, rebound, and something else, and that was it. No actual, nothing, documentation as why you did it in that particular way, which was, anyway. So, well, you have just classic, effects of, images. I can share, well, you'll see the slides later anyway. Transcription. So earlier this year I began transcribing the manuscript in TEI P5. Again, note that there is no edition for this text. No edition has been produced. So my edition is going to be the first, and it's a born digital edition. So I started encoding it using a pretty detailed set of tags to enable both basic and more advanced searching. But since joining the Digital Humanities team in Leipzig, my approach to the transcription is becoming increasingly influenced by the CTS protocol. So the Canonical Text Services protocol, which was developed by Neil Smith, who's also probably going to be speaking in this series, and Chris Blackwell at the Centre for Hellenic Studies, and from a university I think they're at now. And what the CTS, Canonical Text Services Protocol, does, it assigns, in a nutshell, it labels section, words, pages, paragraphs, graphemes even, so character level, and it assigns URNs, Uniform Resource Names, to each section. You can go in as much detail as possible. And as a means, sort of kind of in a way, it maintains our citation, what humanists use as citation schemes, so to refer to other texts, it transfers that citation schemes into the book format we're used to in the digital world. And what CTS enables you to do is to dump your CTS compliant text into a CTS repository and library, which is what we're currently building in Leipzig in conjunction with the Perseus Digital Library, to kind of just create this huge, massive ramification and network of texts. What this meant in terms of my transcription, not very much, in the sense that I just had to slightly change my tags to match to match it against the CTS Canonical Text Services Protocol, and not a lot of work, a day's work. And what I hope, so the intention is to publish this online on the website, but also this text, put it in the CTS repository, so if anybody else in the future wants to create a variant of the same text and does it in a CTS, they can compare and contrast anyway. So in light of the catalogue and the tools I've seen and how people do things, the lessons I've learned from it, I chose, for my digital publication, I chose the open source content management system Symfony. Not because most people, it's not because it's what they use, but because that's what a lot of people use, but it's not popular at all, in fact, but it's very lightweight and it's powered by XSLT. So instead of having something heavy like Drupal, that's highly technical and all PHP, it runs on XML and is powered by XSLT. And it was very easy to install as well. And my digital edition will ultimately include, I plan, a short critical apparatus. I don't have time to go into too much detail there. Indices, a glossary. With CTS, it's quite easy to align words to the images. So if you have high quality images, you can align. And translations as well, you can align translations and texts. Provide some context. How I encoded the manuscript, so not leave it to users to guess. Links to other resources, and as I said earlier, dump everything into a CTS library once it's done. And publish everything under Creative Commons license, share alike, so that anybody who wishes to manipulate the data can do so freely. And I plan to start uploading the first set of pages, of transcribed pages, in early autumn, and just to add as I go along. I think that the digital edition, after all, is a constant, a forever work in progress anyway. So, briefly touch upon future work, what I'd like to do after my PhD, or some ideas, an authorship study, to try and really see if I can, not date the manuscript, but confirm that it's from North Africa. That would be quite nice. Also means the studying of scribal hands. I would like to add some variants, 7th century, 8th century variants of the text, which are now housed in France and in Germany, I think. Enrichment and expansion of the brief critical apparatus I'm planning on producing. An aligned translation, English, but it would be nice to have other languages as well. And try and fill in the lacunae that were left behind by the Vatican Library with some cool algorithm or whatever. But that's basically what I'd like to do, and I think I have 3 minutes left, so I'll just end.
Thank you, Greta. Nobody ever complained about a talk finishing a couple of minutes early. It's when they go on too long that's a problem. I'm a big fan of this project, as you know, so I'm not, and having just had your upgrade, you've already had all the awkward questions from me already. So I'm just going to have one very brief one, something that I've become interested in as well. You mentioned the original document still has some of the pricking in there. I mean, this is more evidence that this is a really low quality piece, because they would have been removed at the end. I went to a really, really interesting lecture at UCL Centre by some professor of papyrology on North African Islamic manuscripts, and I'll send you the link to that and have a look. And I think he was about 90. I'm not sure if he's still around. It was last year, so I'm not quite sure if he's still around. But I will get in there quick if you would. Very, very interesting, actually, on the type of manuscripts, the type of writing, and this sort of thing. And this may go some way to help with that as well.
Yeah. Yes, please send you.
Yes, and there's another question coming to you from Gabby. Oh, you've got the answer already. Okay. Yeah. Do you have any other questions?
How do you see this fitting into the world of Augustinian studies? I mean, who else is out there working on texts of Augustine?
Well,
do we know?
The Journal of Augustinian Studies.
Yeah.
You have. There's a lot of people. I mean, America seems to be the journal, and there's a centre. I can't remember the name.
Well, there's a lot in France, but there's a the Revue des Études Augustiniennes. But I'm just wondering, what is there already that's out there online? I mean, it takes me back slightly to your catalogue. What is an edition?
Good question. What is an edition or a digital edition?
No, what is an edition? For that one.
What is an edition? An interpretation of a text.
The word digital in.
Yeah, interpretation of a text, I find. Just somebody's interpretation of a text.
It's not the verification of the text.
Not the?
Verification of the text.
Verification.
In the sense of authenticity. Is an edition a statement of authenticity? This is the words that... I'm not at all clear what an edition is. That's why I wasn't too sure what a digital edition was.
If it is an interpretation, you're putting a spin on it. It's really, you're verifying the text is original, and the marginalia is original, and if there's any the marginalia has no references or citation, you add that. And this is, as we see it in Arabic, they don't call it the edition, they call it verification, tahqiq. And this stems from tahqiq al-Quran, the verification of the Quran, which have to stay as it is, as it originally stated. And this is why our verification of the Arab verification of the manuscript is quite accurate, because this is actually the emphasis on verification of the original source.